Hello everyone and welcome back to another AFL Fantasy Fanatics head-to-head episode where you put two players up against one another to see who will be picking between the two for the 2025 season. I'm your host, Bales, and you can find me at BAILSDT across the socials, and we'll be joined by another special guest, as always, to chat about two Carlton midfielders in Sam Docherty and Adam Cerra, who are a little bit of value, priced under 800k this season and could offer some big upside, particularly with their early run, which we're going to be chatting about on this episode. But joining me is one of my fellow co-hosts in AFL Fantasy Fanatics. He's also part of the coaches panel and also host of Finders Keepers, the new podcast on Keeper League. It is Jordox. Jordox, mate, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Bales. Excited to do this one with you. And we were just talking off air about how we did one of these 12 months ago, and it was the first time we sort of did anything together. So it's been a big 12 months, that's for sure.
Yep, exactly right. Exactly right. We're going to be chatting about, as we said, two of the current midfielders in Sam Docherty and Adam Cerra. So as always, we'll go to the price and ownership and that. So we'll start with Docherty. So Docherty priced at 782k. Current ownership 13.7%. So quite good there with him. Just played the one game last year, obviously with the 48, and obviously did his ACL, unfortunately, in opening round. So he's a little bit cheaper. He's got the 30% discount on his 2023 average. And then also Adam Cerra, who's also had his own injury troubles, unfortunately, throughout his career. 745k, priced around, I'm trying to think, it's around that sort of 75-ish mark, average to 72.6. Yes, price 72. Yeah, wasn't sure if he's priced on last year, but priced at 72.6, which is what he averaged from the 12 games last year. And yeah, his ownership 4.1%, so a little bit more unique than the doc. So I'll be taking Sam Docherty today. Jordox will be taking Adam Cerra, and we'll be starting off with the person that's jumping on. Normally I say guest, but I should be saying co-host today. So the co-host will be starting today, and Jordox will be starting with Adam Cerra. So Jordox, why should people be selecting Adam Cerra in their fantasy classic side for 2025?
Well, it's a great head-to-head we've got because it's two players, obviously, from the same team that there's reasons why they are underpriced, and they do have good scoring history, obviously more so Doc, but Cerra, I believe, can get right up there. So, look, Cerra, this is going to be his fourth year at Carlton after 4 years at Freo, so he's certainly been around for a while now. 2024 was just such a struggle for him with the injuries, and it was a real stop-start kind of season. So he wasn't really able to get going at any point and build any momentum. But if you look at the year before that, 2023, he averaged over 90. It was his best career season. And Carlton actually went better as well. So I think Carlton are going to play better with a fit Cerra in the midfield. In terms of his scoring ability, he's never gone above that 95 average he had in 2023. But in that season, he had a few runs that were really, really juicy scoring-wise. He had a run earlier in that year where he scored over 133 times in a row. And I'm not suggesting he's going to do that this year. In fact, he doesn't have to. Because he's priced at 72, all he'd have to do is get to around about his best season, and that's a 20-point increase in value there. So there's options. I guess the question mark is, well, I don't want to outlay 745k in my midfield on a guy if there is going to be injuries again and stop-start again. That would be really painful, particularly when we do have a lot of value in the midfield. And obviously there's no guarantees with I can't guarantee a player's not getting injured, but he has had a complete off-season and is looking as fit as he's probably ever been. So in terms of the midfield mix at Carlton, there's a few there. Young Jagger Smith's going to give it a bit of a crack, which is going to be great to see. You got Cripps and Sam Walsh, who may have a slower start this year because he's got his own injury concerns. And then it's sort of Hewitt or Cerra for that last spot, maybe a bit of Docherty as well. I think they like Hewitt there. He does he's one of the defensive mids that they have. But I do think Cerra adds more and gives more in that role. And even if he's not at the CBA, he'll be around the ground, and I think he'd even be quite handy in terms of distributing off halfback as well throughout the game. So I just think for his value, Bales, he's going to be there round 1 against Richmond, and I reckon he could start with a bang.
Yeah.
The other thing I'll add to, sorry, just quickly, just in terms of, a guy who it's really only been one bad injury year. He's had injuries here and there throughout his career. But to show you how confident Carlton clearly are in him and how he's going to go this year and beyond, they extended his contract this preseason by 5 years, which is quite crazy when you think about the injuries he had last year. But that just shows you the, the faith that Carlton have in him.
Yeah, exactly. That's it was a bit surprising. I thought he was going to get maybe the extension mid-year, maybe end of the year, something like that. But to do it in the preseason, that sort of shows Carlton have clearly got confidence in him to withstand a full season, and clearly he's had a good preseason. That's what they would have seen. And you mentioned obviously Richmond to start off with a bang, but Carlton start off with a bang in terms of their opening fixture. That's what I think makes these guys so enticing, and hopefully like a Jagger Smith can make a lot of cash for us in Classic. But they start off with Richmond, then they go Hawthorn, tough matchup there. But then they go Bulldogs, Collingwood, West Coast, North Melbourne, Geelong, Adelaide, St Kilda in their first 9 weeks. It's a pretty good run, particularly those first 6 weeks as well. Only Hawthorn is the only difficult matchup there. The other 5 look like it's almost as good a run you can hope for a team. They play all the good teams there. Obviously, Cerra's never going to get tags. There's no worries with that whatsoever anyway. But that's exactly what you'd be looking for, especially if you can get off to a big start against Richmond. And that's, I guess, the caveat with both these players is that they play the best team to score fantasy points for, which we project this season, round 1. And these guys are both value. So if they can pump out a 110, 120 score, bang, that's the cash gen. That's started already. And that's for the next 4 or 5 weeks where that cash continues to rise. So is that something that you'd be looking at, particularly, I think, with the Cerra, because we have seen, as you mentioned, in patches where he has shown the ability to go big in this Carlton side, even when you've got a Cripps and a Walsh there. And with Walsh is starting a bit slower, you'd think that Cerra's going to have to pick up some of that slack as well and have a little bit more responsibility. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. He's going to have to step up. Like I said, it's his 8th year in the AFL. It's fourth year at Carlton. And, I think he would have been so frustrated last year because he had essentially the breakout, Carlton fans were looking for in 2023, and then, went backwards last year. But that fixture that you just rolled out, I mean, that's your dream fixture for this type of pick, isn't it? You're not picking someone like this to, necessarily have him in your side till the end of the year. He's there to, give you some all right scores, some decent value scores, but essentially make you money and then upgrade, maybe mid-year around the buys. So the fact that he's got such a nice bunch of the schedule is so fruitful on paper anyway in the first half of the year only makes the pick more appealing.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess he's got, I think it was, I can't remember where exactly I've heard this stat. I've heard it a few times as well that Cerra was the highest averaging fantasy player in your draft class. So that was that's higher than your guys that have come through, like your Nick Dacos, who obviously was a few years after, but his average was massive. I don't have the exact number on me, but I know in fact it was quite big. So that he's got the junior pedigree as well. We've seen him have these patches as well in his career, as you mentioned, both at Fremantle and at Carlton, where he's been able to put up some big scores, and it's just been the injuries that have held him back. So I think if he can stay fit for a season, and particularly with those early fixtures, that could be quite fruitful for his fantasy scoring early in the season. But I also think that a guy like Sam Docherty could also profit from this as well. So Sam Docherty, as we mentioned at the start of the episode, he missed all of last year with his ACL injury in opening round, which really sucked because we just want a guy, especially like Sam Docherty, to get a good run at it. And he has had good runs in a few years, but there's always just been injury, and it's been more a serious one that's come in. So only the 2 games last year, obviously played in opening round with the 48 and then came in the final and just scored the 67 from 74% time on ground. But when you consider that he recovered in his ACL in essentially record time, I think we can forgive him for scoring a 67. And 67, to be fair, is probably a pretty good score at that as well. But if we look at his 2023 average, because we've heard him we were all hoping when Nick Newman unfortunately went down with his own serious injury that meant Docherty halfback. That doesn't sound like that's going to be the case. Hearing Sam Docherty, so for the man himself on the Summer Sessions podcast, Carlton hosts that podcast where he was chatting about he can play across all positions, but the two positions he's most likely going to be playing is inside, mid, and on the wing. So very unlikely to play half back. And he said maybe a little bit of half forward as well. He said the only reason you go to half back is if something has gone wrong. So that's probably sounding like an injury, or they're getting like badly beaten in a quarter, and he has to go back and sort of stem the flow. I think Carlton will be pretty good on that front, so I don't see that happening. So if we look back to what we think he can do, because Docherty's we know how good a fantasy scorer is. Like he's averaged over 100 multiple times, averaged over 110 a couple of times as well, obviously including that 116.6 in 2017. But that was from half back. So I think we've got to look more at what he's done in a potential role like this. So in 2023, he averaged 22% CBAs, and he played a lot more on the wing and in the midfield. So he played a little bit of mix of defense as well, but his main position in that year was particularly the back half here was that midfield wing role, and he ended up averaging 102.1 from 23 games, as I said, from 22% time, 22% CBAs as well. So look, just looking at some of his scores here from when he played midfield on DFS. So obviously use DFS all the time for stuff like this. Very, very, very good website there. Make sure you guys check it out. I'm sure you guys do already, but if you don't, make sure you do. So some scores here when he's playing mostly forward, wing, or midfield. So he scored 129 points against Brisbane in round 8. Then he scored 108 against Sydney, 87 there. Then 95, 124, 113, 115. 88, 130, 87, 112, 92 from just 59% time on ground. Got injured in that game. Can't exactly remember what that was a couple of years ago. 80, 93, and then obviously went into the final. So a lot of good scores there, all over, mostly over 80 as well when he's playing in this wing midfield role. So I guess, Jordox, the question for Docherty is, can he be this consistent scorer? Because obviously the game is sort of shifted a bit, particularly over the last 12 months, where a lot of these halfback guys are the guys that are scoring, and the midfielders and wingers aren't scoring as high as what they were. So he was scoring quite well a couple of years ago when midfielders were still going 110, but is the new norm the midfielders number one going that 110, 111, and then the halfback guys just dominating? So that's, I guess, the question. I guess the role for him is up in the air. I think Cerra, his role, we know what he's going to do. He's going to be mostly midfield. He's probably going to rest forward every now and again and probably roll up to a stoppage, or might start on the wing and go in. But Cerra's going to be 60, 65% midfield at least. Docherty, we sort of don't really know what that split is. Is it 50% mid, 50% wing? Is it 60, 70% wing, 20, 30% midfield, and then maybe 10% forward? That's, I guess, the question mark. So, but do you think that Docherty and his natural scoring history sort of can counteract his sort of unknown role? Or do you think that with the older age, injuries, it makes it a little bit more of a risky pick because we don't know that role?
It certainly makes it more of a risky pick. And if you're comparing it directly to Cerra, it does, particularly because it's a bit more money. There's a little bit more unknown. And then you've got the age and the fact that he is coming back off a very serious injury, although he did play that one game in the finals, like you said. So I just wonder if Carlton aren't going to be a little bit cautious with him throughout the year, and in terms of his load, and you know, if Carlton are going to make finals again and be serious contenders, they're going to want Docherty firing at the right time of the year. So I could see him being rested throughout the year. And in terms of his role, I mean, the thing I think that's great about Doc is wherever he's playing on the ground, you know, he's such a leader that he's going to end up with the ball in his hands. So even though he doesn't have that plum halfback role, I think there's going to be many times where they just give it to him anyway. You know, if you think about the end of quarters where maybe Blues just trying to hold down the fort, not concede again, play a bit more kick to kick, I think he could be someone that sort of leads that sort of play in red time in quarters. So there's plenty of upside. And, you know, even those numbers you just said, what he averaged in that year where he was playing mid and wing, surprised me. I didn't realize he'd scored that well. So, yeah, he could do it again. He's missed a lot of footy. and I just think they're going to want to be a little bit conservative with his workload.
Yeah, I think that's a good point you raised as well, because at the end of the day, Carlton are chipped in for this year. Obviously, they're going for top four and obviously premiership and everything. So I think that they're going to try and they want Docherty firing the second half of the year, which could counteract the good run, because if they've got a good run, does that give them the extra sort of ability to be able to sub him out in games like against Richmond? If they're up by 5, 6, 7, 8 goals, is he the guy that gets subbed out? That's the question sort of I have. But I guess the good run early, and particularly with a few of these games as well being at the MCG, like round 1, 2, 4, 7, and 9 are all at the MCG. So what's that? So that's what's 2, 4, so 5 games at the MCG in their first 9 games, which is obviously fantastic. They also play at Marvel against the Dogs there as well. Then they've got Adelaide Oval and then Marvel again. So they only leave Melbourne once in the first 9 weeks. So I guess that's good in terms of they don't have a trip to Perth, and they might not just rest him on a long trip. Like that's that he should play because they're in Melbourne a lot, and the only game is Gather Round, and I'd imagine he plays in that. So I think he's the guy that I think, as you say, no matter what role he's got, I feel like he's going to score because he's one of the leaders at the club. He's going to get open. They're going to kick in the ball. Obviously, as you said as well, with these games, if they're just trying to chip around, he might get involved a lot in those +6s. Just because he's playing on a wing as well, and because he's not playing halfback, does not mean he's not going to be in defensive 50. As a wingman, we know that they get up and down the ground. He's going to get back into defense and get some of these +6s. So it might not be as fruitful as his halfback role, but I still think Docherty's a player that's very, very quite easy capable of averaging 90, 95 plus, even in a wing role, because of the sort of player that he is and that Carlton do look for him. So that's the question. I think he's a big preseason watch, because if he's looking fit and firing in preseason, looking like the Doc that we know, then we know for a fact that he can average over 100 even in this role. And even if he averages 95, these guys here are priced in the sort of lower to mid 70s. If they're going 95, 100, that's a great pick. You're getting 20, 25 points of upside, but they're getting close-ish to, if we're thinking these midfielders aren't going to go back to the 110s, 115s, and the number one midfielder is just a 110, and you've got to host these guys at like 107, 108, you're only like sort of within 10 points of them if they can average 95, 100. So that's, I guess, and then Cerra's the exact same thing as well. That's why I think these two guys are really interesting. So I think Oliver's in his own category. I think we're all picking him. He's looking great. And I think do we pair him with another one of these 700K guys? And I feel like these two guys would be at the front of the queue because of their early run and because of what they've done in the past as well. So I think they're a very, very interesting pair, which leads us to who'll be picking out of the two players in our sides for 2025. So Jordox, if you had to pick one out of Sam Docherty and Adam Cerra, who are you picking?
I put Cerra in my side very early in the preseason, and he's stayed there ever since. The only time I contemplated Doc was when Newman went down, and I thought, that could change things, the temptation and the thought of getting defender status. But it doesn't look like that's happening, so I'm quite comfortable sticking with Cerra over Doc.
Yeah. I think I'm Cerra as well, just with the fact that I think the role is just more certain for Cerra. I think I like the midfield role, the early run as well. I think early run for both is obviously great, and I'm not ruling Doc out either, but I just think that with Cerra, with the midfield, he's obviously had a full preseason, which is fantastic. For these guys who've had injury histories, you just want them to have a full preseason, no little hiccups, and he hasn't even had any little hiccups. He's been full preseason. People saw he probably mismatched him the other day. He had his wedding, so I think that's a pretty fair excuse to be missing match sim. So he's been good, full preseason, and I think that both are going to be selected by. I think their ownership's going to climb. I think that 4.1% for Cerra, and then you've got just under 14% for Doc. I think that both could climb as well, particularly because they play the first game. A lot of people like having players in that first game, and against Richmond as well to get a good start. So I'll go Cerra just. So you obviously mentioned Cerra. Have you ever had both in your side, or has it just been one? And you don't see you picking both? Do you think it'll just be the one?
I don't think you could do both. I mean, that unwritten rule about having too many from the same club. I mean, I don't subscribe to that entirely, but when it's a similar thing,
it's the Crows.
Yeah, well, unless it's the Crows, of course. But when you're using your head, not your heart, you want to have that balance, and to have two. risky-ish picks around the same price from the same club. No, unless I was really confident Docherty could flick to the back line in round 6, which I'm not. So, no, I couldn't see both of them in.
Yeah, particularly with Ollie Hollands, right? If we're looking at Ollie Hollands, well, we obviously mentioned him on the last episode as well with Vams. I was quite keen on him, and so was Vams. And if you're starting him and then you're starting a Cerra, you can't have all three. I don't think that's you're probably trying to go for the number 1 rank after the first game as well, and try and have a top 100 rank so you can maybe take a screenshot and see how you go. But probably a bit risky. But yeah, I think I don't have either currently at the moment. I have had Cerra. Docherty the both have been in my team throughout the preseason. It's just been sort of flipping between the two. I don't have either at the moment, but definitely could change. I like that early run, so I could make room for an extra one. But I've currently got Hollands there as well, so I do have a Carlton. I think it's a good idea to have one of these Carlton players, particularly with this early run as well. So if it's not a Cerra or Doc and it's a Hollands, I think it'd be good to go one of them, just because I think one of them will be a really good pick. And whether you start one and one of the others gets off to a good start and you flip over, then that's fine. Obviously, that's what these early season trades are for. But yeah, that's where I'm currently sitting with them. So that wraps up episode 7 of the series. Let us know in the comments below if you guys are going with Adam Cerra or Sam Docherty in your fantasy sides this season. Are you going both or are you going neither? Let us know as well. And how would you rank Hollands, Docherty, and Cerra in terms of your preference for starting in 2025? Also, any other questions, put them in the comments below, and I'll get to those when I can. But Jordox, mate, thank you very much for jumping on with me for one of these episodes, and obviously continued throughout the season with all the pods and everything like that. Where can the people find you across the socials? And also, where can people find you on the Coaches Panel and the Finest Keepers podcast?
Yep, so I'm on X at Jordox 2020, but also on X at FindKeepAFL. Yes, so the new podcast on Keeper and Dynasty League strategy, Finders Keepers. We will be, depending when this lands, we will be about 3 episodes in, and starting with rankings. So rankings for redraft pools. And if you go back a couple of weeks to episode 2, to the midfielder episode, I actually included both Cerra and Docherty in that conversation. So check it out for a bit of a look at those players from a different lens, a keeper league lens.
Yep, exactly. No, make sure you guys go and check it out. You can find me at BAILSDT across socials, and you can find us at AFL Fantasy Fans on the socials as well. If you haven't liked and subscribed, make sure you do that as well. It takes 2 seconds and 2 clicks, and that would be a big help to us here at the Fantasy Fanatics and the YouTube channel. So make sure you guys do that. And if you guys listening on the podcast, 5-star rating and review, that would be absolutely fantastic if you guys could do that. And we're back on Wednesday for another episode 8. We start off with our first guest from the Hat Chat crew. It is Jake, obviously fellow South Australian there, jumping on to chat about a couple of Swans that we're all contemplating starting. And can we have both? That's, I guess, the big question there. So we'll be chatting about those in the next episode. But until then, catch you guys later. See ya.
See ya.